When I tell people that being a lesbian is the best thing that ever happened to me, I'm never really that sure how that's going to go. Sometimes, not a big deal. Other times, it feels like a revolutionary gesture. I have a friend whose name is Tina, and we've known each other since we were little girls, and she is this big mouth, big hair, big-hearted, big makeup Texas woman, and I absolutely adore her. She's been married to her husband for probably over 20 years, I guess, and they have great kids, and they've got a great life, and it's a very different life than mine. But the thing, and the best thing that we have in common, is that we're both really happy. Now, I'm pretty sure she's still holding a grudge over the time in 5th grade when I cut her Barbie's hair and dressed it in G.I. Joe clothes. And we're kind of unlikely friends, but I adore her. So last summer, she invited me to go to this seminar. It was one of those ninja internet marketing for world domination kind of things. And everybody there was going to be like the super high achiever. Like the people that just sold their startup to Google and now they're training for the Olympics. So, right. So we're in the car on the way there, and she said, "What are you going to tell people you do if they ask you?" And I said, "Well, I guess I'm going to tell them the truth, which is that I write and talk to people about how being a lesbian is the best thing that ever happened to me." And she said, "You are not." I said, "What?" And she said, "I don't understand why it is that you think you have to keep telling people that. Things are getting so much better for y'all. In fact, I'm not even really that sure why you think that you need to tell people you're a lesbian in the first place." I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, for starters, your hair. And sweater vests and jeans and sneakers and blazers, a lot of blazers." Now, I like to think that I am part of a grand tradition, and that is my tribal garb. But if somebody decides to assume that I'm a lesbian from a mile away, before they've ever even met me, I am totally great with that. Because for me, being lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, LGBT is a gift. And I think that's an idea worth spreading. So that's what I want to talk about today. First, why would anybody think that something that is so widely regarded as a challenge to overcome or as a reason to feel disenfranchised and angry is a gift? And second, why do we have to keep talking about it? So if you were to look back across the continuum of time, through time immemorial, and pick any point on that timeline, you'll find a group, you'll find a race, you'll find an ethnicity, you'll find a religion, you'll find some group that has come to the forefront as the catalyst for change. In my lifetime, it's been us. Now, of course, you can't compare the journeys of all these different groups. Everyone has its own challenge, each has got its own cultural repertoire, very complex stuff. But the thing that is true of all of them is that every time we've had a dialogue as a society about these groups and gone through this process, it's elevated the collective consciousness. We learn about tolerance, we learn about acceptance, we learn about interconnectedness, and we learn about the ways in which we are more alike than we are different. I am incredibly proud and grateful to have been alive at a time when my people were the chosen. Incredibly grateful, because we are the current event on what Dr. King called the arc of the moral universe that bends towards justice. So not only do I think that it's a gift, I think it's a purpose. It's a part of something much bigger. And the other thing we've learned from history is that once a society has changed its level of acceptance, it doesn't go backwards. Nobody says, we should have never given women the vote. Well, maybe. Nobody says, bring back separate drinking fountains, or even, hey, whatever happened to that throwing Christians to the lions thing? Doesn't happen. Now, if you're an inveterate TED Talk watcher like I am, you've probably seen a few about compassion, or authenticity, or vulnerability. In fact, we've heard about some of those things today. It's part of our contemporary dialogue. We are living in this Oprah-driven search for the aha moment. It's everywhere. We trade wise and insightful quotes on social media like baseball cards. I went to the big box hardware store to buy a lawnmower, and there were cartons of inspirational sayings next to the laundry detergent. It's everywhere. And the important thing for me, and the thing that I've begun to know, is that as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, LGBT people, we deal with these themes early and often. You remember sitting in a literature class, learning about man's inhumanity to man, or the individual versus society? We deal with this stuff every single day. And so in a way, it propels us towards a higher consciousness, towards a different way of looking at the world. There's a woman sitting here in the audience today, and some of you met her upstairs. Her name is Sherry. Sherry's parents have not spoken to her in 32 years. Since as a 17-year-old, she came and told them she was a lesbian, and they kicked her out of the house. Imagine that. Here's the striking thing, though. Here's what Sherry says. Sherry says, yeah, it was an incredibly painful experience, but she wouldn't have it any other way. Because what it's taught her is that she doesn't have to modify who she is. She doesn't have to make compromises to make other people happy. The only person whose happiness she's responsible for is her own. She's a walking example of how to take adversity and turn it into a better, higher version of yourself. Now, we are all familiar with the fear of rejection. Everybody knows. Tina's 14-year-old locked herself in her room, sobbing for a couple of days because some people were mean to her on Facebook, and they unfriended her. We've all felt what that feels like. We've all felt what it feels like when somebody says, there is something about you that is not okay. We know what that's like. But those are the times when we get to decide what is okay in here. Now, when I first came out, there were plenty of times I would have told you being a lesbian was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Higher consciousness was not really on my radar. I was mostly interested in where am I going to find some other gay people and girls that will date me. But as I began to meet people and as I began to get out into this world, I saw people who made the decision and the choice to lie, to edit, and to hide behind this wall of shame that they've created because that was going to keep them safe, because it's scary. And I was scared too, but I did what a lot of people do when they're scared. I got angry, because that brings you a little jolt of power. I marched, I protested, it never stopped for me. I was incredibly, incredibly angry because all of those things were true, and some of them still are. But I remember a day when there was a man, and I screamed at him until it felt like my lungs were bleeding because he was holding a sign that said, God hates fags. And then I went home and I realized that I probably hadn't done a lot to change that man's opinion that day. And that really what being angry was doing was keeping me from showing up as who I am, which is a person who believes that love should win. Now, all of those things that I was angry about are true, and certainly protest, dissent are critical in the face of injustice. But so is love. So the trick is to find the balance. One of my favorite quotes is from Dr. Wayne Dyer. He says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And it's true. Whatever it is that I'm out there looking for in the world is the first thing that I'm going to see, except my car keys. But what I choose, the person I want to be, what I choose today is to see that my experiences as a lesbian have taught me to go deeper and bigger than I ever would have otherwise. Being a part of a marginalized group has given me a sensitivity towards oppression and just towards people in general. It's changed the way I look at all of those things. And what it's taught me is to look for the similarities before I look for the differences. It's an amazing thing to understand. And the other thing that I've learned from my community is that we're already equal. We are working to change the laws to reflect that. And the other thing is that the only thing I really have to lose is myself. So that brings us to the second question, is why do we have to keep talking about this? Well, all those groups that I was talking about before, the difference between us and them, from LGBT people and them, is that for the most part, they all have had the support or at least a shared common experience with their families. I heard the comedian Wanda Sykes in The Perfect Statement. She said that for her, the difference between being black and gay was that she didn't have to tell her parents that she was black. And it's true. Nobody knows unless we talk about it. And we do it over and over and over again. And the good thing about that is, and the thing that we have seen, all of the research shows that the thing that most changes people's negative opinions about us is knowing us, is exposure to us. So we have to talk about it because that's what's creating the change. There's a whole cycle that exists for us when we do things like say, "Hi, my name's Karen and I'm a lesbian." It changes society. Now, I heard a guy the other day, and it was a gay man, and he was doing this thing, this very wistful kind of thing about, won't it be great? I can't wait for the day when we don't have to go through this stuff anymore. When people stop making assumptions about each other. And I thought, I can't wait for that day either. But rather than sitting and wishing for it, what I'm going to do is keep talking about it until we make it happen. So I have other friends on the other end of the spectrum that study queer theory and sexual identity, and they write doctoral dissertations on things like rejecting the heteronormative paradigm and the dissolution of the gender binary and things like that. And it's fascinating. It's an incredibly fascinating topic. Really cutting edge stuff. But when we're talking, I always have to remind them that I am over here with cousins that write me letters that say, "You're going to hell." And they refer to my girlfriend of 12 years as that woman. The academics are here. My cousins are here. And it's a big conversation. So, okay, when I found out I was going to do this talk, I had to call Tina. "I want to do a TEDx talk. I'm so excited. Can't wait." She was like, "Girl, that's wonderful. What are you going to talk about?" And I said, about how being a lesbian is the best thing that ever happened to me. And she said, "Good." You know why? Because last week I was talking to a woman at my church, and she was very upset because she thinks her son is gay, and she doesn't know how to talk to him about it. She doesn't know what to say. And she said, "And because I have been hanging around listening to you, I felt like I knew what to say to support her." And I said, "Well, what'd you say?" And she said, "Well, I told her that she should not worry about what to say or to saying the wrong thing. She should just start talking. And that she should make sure that he knows that she loves him. And then I told her that being gay was a gift." And I'm on the other end of the phone going, But then I pushed it too far, and I said, "Well, did you tell her that being gay could be the best thing that ever happened to you?" And she hung up the phone on me. But I think about that woman's son, and this is what I know. No matter what happens, with parental support, legal advances, societal acceptance, the thing that is never going to change is that moment, and it is a lonely moment, when you look in that mirror and you say, there is something about me that is different and nobody else knows it. And now I have to summon the courage to go and tell them. And that's not a gay thing. That's not a straight thing. That's a human thing. So this is what I want you to take away from this. When you get a call or in a conversation next week, next month, next year, and it's going to happen about this topic, with somebody that's struggling or trying to find the right words, you have a choice about who you want to be. You can choose to stand there with every ounce of empathy, compassion, and humanity that you have in an effort to make and find a point of connection. Because that's where everything good really starts. In fact, I would say that the ability to find that point of connection in every interaction in your life is a gift. My name is Karen, and being a lesbian is the best thing that ever happened to me.